Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video. And myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update. Uh, Second part thereof for the 15th of August 2024. I say second part thereof. There's been a Kursk update today. So this is a military aid video. If you're wondering why I'm producing more content than I should be doing on holiday, I should be enjoying myself out there. Speaking to my partner just before we came back up to the hotel room, we just went for a meal in the hotel complex with our boys. One of our boys is here doing some kind of artwork inside in the cool, and the other one's out and about uh, cavorting with some friends or whatever. They're only 13, but it is so hot out here, and we had to Google why are we getting so tired and it turns out to regulate your body temperature. It takes up a lot of energy, and you do get fatigued and exhausted in the heat. And so we end up coming, like, our rock and roll days are obviously over because we end up coming to bed like 9:30 tops. Just and then I just get in the air conditioning of the hotel room. I get a bit of a second wind, and so decide to talk to you guys because that's how cool I am. So yeah, that partly explains why I'm producing more content than I should do. It's just heat is exhausting us. Anyway, let's go to military aid segment here, and we're going to start with the US. So just now says next, although this was goodness me this morning, White House to announce a new military aid package or new military aid packages for Ukraine. According to John Kirby, US will announce military aid packages for Ukraine in the coming days. I'm really interested to see what this is because we only recently had, what was it, $120 million package. And I think there was some US aid as well on top of that, of what was that, 1.5 billion or something of orders. But as far as packages of presidential drawdown authority where they take from the US stockpiles to give to Ukraine, and then they have a separate kind of income stream that they put aside for Ukraine to actually regenerate that lost inventory. And essentially, as I've argued before, the money for Ukraine is essentially money for upgrading the US inventory and US armed forces so that they give away older stuff and get newer stuff in. And they put that down as aid to Ukraine. And it is aid to Ukraine. They're giving stuff to Ukraine. But really, you could just as easily relabel Ukraine supplemental Ukraine aid package as the US armed forces upgrade package, because that's essentially what happens, certainly with the presidential drawdown authority stuff. The US aid stuff, that you could relabel that as orders for US inventory, US industry. So you could relabel these things so that it sits better with US voters. For example, you say, hey, we're going to be just doing some expenditure within the US to stimulate the economy. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to build loads of stuff. Okay, it's going to Ukraine, but we're building it in the US. So anyway, some packages coming out, and I'm interested to see whether they are a step up to some of the bigger ticket items that we haven't seen for a long time. So are we going to see some Bradleys? That would be good because the US has an absolute bucket load of Bradleys sitting out in the desert doing the square root of NAFL. And the Ukrainians are losing quite a few Bradleys. They're losing quite a few infantry fighting vehicles in general. Tanks as well. M1 Abrams tanks as included in the tanks that they are losing. And also Strikers and Max Pros and Humvees, all sorts of different APCs and AFVs and other letters of the alphabet. And so I think it's been a long time since we've seen a US aid package that includes some of that equipment, and the US has that stuff to spare. Like that is not a problem for the US to give that stuff away. Really isn't. And I'd expect that. I'd hope that's going to be the case because it has been fairly attritional. In fact, I was just looking at stats for the Kursk maneuver invasion. I don't quite know what to call it. Attack. It was the last time I shared data with you is 29 to 22 visually confirmed losses. That is 29 Ukrainian visually confirmed combat asset losses to 22 Russian losses. And actually, since then, I think it's something like 50 something Ukrainian losses to, I think the Russians have, you put on another, I don't know, 5, 10 or so. So actually, the Ukrainians are starting to lose quite a bit more equipment. That is what we would expect as they're on the attack. But again, that goes back, and it's not too much of a problem if they are getting that equipment back in. The big question, and people have said this on my threads, the big question is how many troops do they lose every time that they lose a piece of materiel? Because that's not as easy to replace. Like you lose a Bradley, yeah, it's a bit of an issue. You've got to go to America, and that gets sent from America to Ukraine, and that's a convoluted process. But actually, it's relatively doable. It just takes a bit of political will. Um, Losing human beings, that's a different kettle of fish, and the Ukrainians can ill afford to do that. So, anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, as is my want. Right, Politico report that the Biden administration is open, quote, open to sending long range joint air to surface standoff missile, JASM, to Ukraine. Well, this is absolutely, this is a big deal. It's a big deal. No final decision has been made, says Special Kherson Kat, on sending the missile, but the administration is working through the complicated details now. According to one Biden administration official, those issues include reviews of the transfer of sensitive technologies and ensuring Ukraine's jets can launch the 2,400-pound missile that carries a 1,000-pound warhead. One would assume the F-16s would be fairly capable of doing that. JASM being a cruise missile for the Americans, but the plot thickens, or possibly doesn't thicken. Not quite sure, because the DoD Department of Defense has just announced a $130 million contract for Lockheed Martin to increase JASM and LRASM missile production. This comes hours after Politico reported that the US is open to supplying Ukraine with JASM air-launched cruise missiles. So we could have a bit of industrial backing to the political machinations of the US government here. However, Colby Badwar says significant JASM development just announced right now. The Department of Defense has awarded Lockheed Martin $130 million contract modification to procure tooling and test equipment needed to increase production quantities of JASM and LRASM. He then does go on to say, to be clear, this award has been planned since at least 2022. I think the timing is an interesting coincidence. US Air Force contracting officers are not privy to what the White House and the Pentagon are leaking to Politico. There are big implications for Ukraine, though. Higher production levels mean the USAF will be more willing to part with their existing inventory. So this could be a happy coincidence that allows the US to provide Ukraine with JASMs more easily. And that would then allow Ukraine to hit significant targets. However, those targets would most certainly be within the, I guess, 1991 borders of Ukraine. There is very little chance that they're going to allow F-16 to be shooting JASMs into Russian territory when they won't allow them to shoot HIMARS beyond the immediate border vicinity. So this is good news. I mean, JASMs would allow Ukraine to really hit Russian targets very much in Ukraine and in the occupied territories significantly. There are only so many Storm Shadows and Scout PGs. In fact, I've not heard of them using any Storm Shadows or Scout PGs for a long time. And I think that's because they have run out of those weapons. So JASMs would be a great addition to their repertoire. Colby Badwar then goes on to say, I'll remind everyone that even if the UK authorizes Ukraine to use their weapons on Russian territory, in the case of long-range munitions like Storm Shadow, they still cannot. So this goes back to an article recently, I think in the Daily Telegraph, where they were kind of excoriating the British government for not allowing the Ukrainians to fire Storm Shadows into Russian territory, even though Keir Starmer met with Zelensky and said that he could. And then the MOD said that actually, no, they can't. And I've been trying to explain that this is not the political will of our government getting in the way here, because it's clear that Keir Starmer said, we're cool with you doing that. There must be something else going on. So the question is whether this is a manufacturing thing from Storm Shadows, because they're co produced with France and Italy. And these countries might say, yeah, we're not actually happy for UK provided Storm Shadows to be used into Russia. Or more likely, is this the US saying, yeah, okay, we know that you have provided these missiles, and we know that you have the right to say, UK, to Ukraine, that you can use these missiles into Ukraine. But at the end of the day, we are not going to allow Ukraine to do that, even though they're your missiles. We'll just say, look, if you use Western provided missiles into Russian territory, we will stop providing you aid packages going forward. So to finish off what Badwa says, Zelensky said that the Biden administration is threatening to terminate military aid if they strike Russia with any Western provided long range system. Now, remember this from some time back, that Biden had, well, sorry, that Zelensky had given an indication that it all really depended on the Biden administration. Here's a quote from, I don't quite know exactly where, but it's a media source that references The Guardian by the looks of it. President Biden, fearful of escalation, has prohibited Ukraine from doing so, not just with American weapons, but with all donated weapons. Zelensky told The Guardian in May, that was it in May, that despite signals from the UK that Ukraine could defend its territory as the Ukrainians saw fit, they could still not use Storm Shadow cruise missiles to strike Russia without approval from Washington. Zelensky stressed to Reuters that his country had abided by all the conditions placed on it by Western weapons donors, as failing to do so would put the whole volume of weapons at risk. So I know some people have been blaming the UK government and Keir Starmer, for example, for the lack of ability to use the Storm Shadows into Russia. This is, like I've said this before, this is clearly not a Keir Starmer thing or a UK government thing. Like, Starmer said that you could. He was corrected by the MOD, which means that there is an agreement that the MOD are in greater understanding of than Starmer is. That is to do with the machinations of the US. So this is a US anti-escalation thing rather than a bilateral UK to Ukraine agreement or disagreement. Ukraine correctly didn't wait for permission from Ottawa to use Rochelle defense senators, since they've already been extensively used in the Kursk operation. So this goes to more kind of permissions from Western governments to use equipment in Russia. This is in terms of material being used inside Russia in the Kursk invasion or Kursk attack. So Ukraine has been cleared to use armor donated by Canada on Russian territory, according to CBC. So that's good news, although that's pretty obvious because they've been widely using senators and, in fact, losing quite a few of them as well. Okay, going to German aid to Ukraine, who says, coincidentally, the German MOD has published its own list of what is to be delivered to Ukraine by the end of this year. The list surprises and excites. So this is what Germany is due to deliver by the end of December 2024. 2 RST SLM SAM launchers. So those are medium range launchers, and there was, I'm sure it's RST that were given some really good uh, kudos by the Ukrainians recently, saying that they are having really good success rates with striking with RST surface to air missile systems. Anyway, 2 RST SLM SAM systems, 4 RST SLS launchers. So those are just the launchers rather than the whole systems. They are the short range version. 10 Cheetah Spags. These are self propelled anti aircraft guns. The Cheetahs are the upgraded radar version of the Gepard, upgraded by the Dutch, I believe, or for the Dutch. They are, I presume, ones that were procured from Jordan that are still to be sent to Ukraine. They are getting to Ukraine in, I guess, in a piecemeal fashion. 12 Panzer Howitzer 2000 self-propelled guns. That's excellent. 4 Tsuzana two for Susanna, two self-propelled guns. One of the Susannas was lost the other day. Those are um, not Czech, Slovakian. They are Slovakian self-propelled howitzers. Then an unknown number of RCH 155 self-propelled guns. These are based on the Boxer chassis that are just coming into use by the Germans and the British. I think they are what are going to replace the AS-90 that the Brits have given most of theirs now to Ukraine, knowing that they are phasing them out. These are ones that only take, was it two crew members? The idea is that eventually they will be, and it stands for remote controlled howitzer, so they will be able to be used not autonomously but remotely. So yeah, anyway, an unknown number of those drones and anti-drone systems, 30 Leopard 1A5 main battle tanks, so that's really really good. 400 MRAPs, mine resistant ambush protection vehicles. So you think of how many they're losing at the moment up in Kursk, and this is going to be absolutely, uh, well, very much needed for the Ukrainians. Logistical vehicles like trucks and tankers, various vehicles like off-road vehicles, pickups and minivans, assault rifles such as the MK556, medical material, and one field hospital. So Germany to Ukraine says, let's talk about that for a moment. Frankly, I wonder how Deal Defense can produce two RST SLM fire units in the next 4 months, train Ukrainian troops on them, and then deliver them to Ukraine, given that production of one system has only just been completed. Pretty strict timeline, but according to my own assessment, one fire unit is definitely to be delivered. The self-propelled artillery systems are very interesting here. Not only are four Susanna 2 SPGs manufactured in Slovakia to be delivered, whose delivery is extremely delayed, but also 12 additional Panzerhaubitze 2000s, 18 of which were promised to Ukraine in February 2024, but their delivery will only take place from 26 to 27, according to publications by the MOD at that time. It is therefore likely that further material from the Bundeswehr will be delivered to Ukraine to allow a much faster delivery. So this is a bit like PDA for the US Presidential Drawdown Authority. This is Bundeswehr drawdown, so taken from the Bundeswehr and then backfilling with these orders, while they will then receive freshly produced Panzerhaubitze 2000s. That's the Bundeswehr. Regarding the MRAPs, it feels like it's getting more and more. Back in September 2023, Germany pledged 200 MRAPs, of which still no vehicle has been delivered to Ukraine. We have now reached 400 MRAPs, and they are supposed to be delivered in the next 4 months. Let's see. So these are really big numbers. This is really good news, and the Germans are stepping up big time. It's going to be interesting to see exactly what is delivered and when. But the idea is that all of that is due to be delivered before the end of the year. And of course, we're nearing the middle of August now. Okay, the Landesfeuerwehr, the brand, Landesfeuerwehrverband Bayern EV, just for accuracy's sake, has put together a major donation of 8 firefighting vehicles, 15 tons of equipment, 6 mobile water cannons, and more. Has started its journey to Ukraine yesterday. The transport was financially supported by the Free State of Bavaria. So the Bavarians coming up with the goods here, and this is the sort of equipment that is finding its way to Ukraine. That's absolutely essential, especially since the Russians are doing a pretty good, and by good I mean horrific, job of targeting, explicitly it appears, targeting emergency vehicles that the Ukrainians use. So that will be well received, no doubt. Okay, so moving from Germany to France now, French aid to Ukraine says, according to the Ministry of Armed Forces, 284 VABs, these are armored personnel vehicles, were delivered to Ukraine between February 2022 and the 1st of May 2024. That's a huge amount. Now, we have seen a couple of these be used. One hit a mine, I think, and had to be towed back to be fixed up. So we know they're using them in Kursk at the moment. At least 412 VABs will have been delivered by the end of 2024 or early 2025. This is being expedited or facilitated, I guess, by the decision by the French government to give Ukraine phased out vehicles, and they are phasing out the VABs, I believe, and so that gives quite a scope for delivery of a decent amount of equipment from France to Ukraine. Now, also with regard to France, this is again French aid to Ukraine saying, and quoting from, I'm not sure here, but I think this is, I think he says it right at the end. It's quite a long thread, this one, isn't it? The Thierry Francoux, the CEO of Urenco. So this it appears to be a European arms manufacturer. Anyway, less than 2 years to set up this plant in Bergerac is an achievement. We usually talk about 4 to 5 years to build this kind of capacity, but here it will take less than 2 years between the announcement of the ministry operational implementation of this factory. If we can set up a factory here in Bergerac in less than 2 years, it is because we have maintained these skills in Sweden. We are manufacturing and testing from Sweden in parallel with the establishment of this factory, powder production in Bergerac, and that's as mentioned, Thierry Francoux. Urenco will proceed with the construction of a factory that will allow us to reproduce our own powders for the eventual equivalent of 150,000 155 mil shells per year. We will once again have the production capacity to meet our needs. That's Sébastien Lecornu, saying that, who is the defense minister for the French at the moment. By 2026, Urenco will have 2 artillery powder production lines on French soil. This will enable France to produce 1.2 million modular charges, the equivalent of more than 200,000 caliber 52 complete shots. At the same time, the Forge d'État should be able to produce 180,000 standard 155 mil shells, such as the M107, by 2026. Outside France, Urenco plans to open 3 new sites between 2025 and 2028. One in the US for the production of 1,500 modular charge boxes, and 2 in European countries with which Urenco is in advanced discussions. These 2 countries are expected to produce 1,200 tons of powder and modular charges equivalent to 95,000 complete shots. In terms of innovation, the first 2 modular charges assembly lines are fully automated and operate 24 hours a day, every day of the year. Just 6 technicians monitor the line from behind control screens. Wow. Who needs humans, right? Inside one building, a yellow robot picks up a grey box arriving on a carpet, fills it with large granules of propellant powder, attaches an igniter, and sticks in on a cover. We use disruptive manufacturing processes, 3D printing of energetic materials, and acoustic resonance mixing system to move faster and make our products on demand, and also continuous manufacturing systems. We move fast, we make mistakes fast, we learn fast, and we correct. As a result, the development time has been halved. The average time from idea to production is less than 6 months. Bergerac site has also been described as an industrial showcase of the future, a prize awarded by the Minister of Industry and Energy, Roland Lescure. For the production of powders, Urenco will also set up a continuous production line which will allow it to operate 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. According to Urenco CEO, this will make it possible in particular to, quote, produce large quantities of powders. Urenco is, quote, the only one in the world, end quote, to use such an industrial process in Karlskoga and soon in Bergerac. Clearly, Urenco has copied and pasted its Swedish plant in order to get the new Bergerac plant up and running as quickly as possible. In addition, Urenco and KNDS France, in partnership with the Defence Procurement and Technology Agency of the Ministry of Armed Forces, have innovated by recycling old powders, AUF1 and TRF1, to produce new modular charges. According to Thierry Francoux, Urenco, quote, responded to an urgent operational need with new methods that are not common in the defense world, end quote. The team, the manufacturers, and the military took less than 6 months to evaluate, qualify on 3 systems used in Ukraine, including the Caesar, dismantle the old ammunition, and finally put into production new modular charges using these powders. The initiative has made it possible to ensure the sustainability of aid to Ukraine. It also, of course, allows us to meet your export needs. This is unrelated, but Latvia will acquire production capacity for modular charges for 155mm artillery systems, the first step to the development of a local ammunition sector in which a Baltic state will be supported, in particular by KNDS France. This project is one of the main beneficiaries of the European Act in support of ammunition production, which, with more than 41 million euros granted by the EU Commission. Thanks to the funding, KND's France's industrial capacity will increase from 50,000 to 400,000 modular charges per year, enabling it to provide long-term support to the Ukrainian armed forces. Okay, that's an awful lot of information there for you, and some granular detail about what's going on in France and also the Baltics and indeed Sweden. But it does show you that these things take a long time to get themselves sorted out, but also that what's happened has been relatively quick, considering that none of these countries and entities are on a war footing. So this is the strategic planning of the governments in question here, working with private industry to make sure that there is an uptick in the production of all the stuff, for want of a better word, needed for complete shots for artillery ammunition to be manufactured and sent to Ukraine. And it's really good news that the French are upping their capacity, and that will help them going forward. My only question is, because we talked about this previously, the difference between the private industry and the public sector. So in the US, where it's predominantly public sector run, these ammunition plants, manufacturing plants, although there is sort of subcontracting, all sorts of stuff going on, but the public sector has been able to respond quicker than the private sector because they're not interested in long-term ramifications of ramping up production of any given thing. So, for example, the US government says we desperately need to produce X number of shells, and we want these plants to make all these shells. Please go and make them right now. And the plants don't go, well, yeah, but we can buy all this equipment in. But then what happens if you don't need us to make these shells in 2 years' time? What are we going to do with this equipment, all this investment that's needed in order to ramp up production? The government don't really care about that. It's like, we have strategic needs. We don't care about long-term profitability of this because we're not in the business of making profit. We're in the business of fulfilling our military strategic objectives by producing enough equipment to send to Ukraine for our geopolitical end game. But a private firm like KNDS or whoever it is will say, right, yeah, sure, we can build more stuff. We can manufacture more artillery shells and complete shots, if you like. That's cool. Yeah, that's fine. But in order to do that, we need to build or buy or procure more equipment, more capital investment needs to take place in order to do that. And we will only do that if we can know that that machinery is going to be operating 5 and 10 years into the future. And because otherwise that investment is not, we're not going to get a return on investment. So we're not going to make a profit. Yeah, we'll make some quick bucks now, but that won't go towards mitigating for the massive investment needed to generate these capacities. So we need to make sure that we've got these orders in 10 years' time. Now, there must be some confidence that there is going to be these orders coming in because they are ramping up production. They are investing in their manufacturing facilities. But I do wonder what it looks like in 5 years' time. So assuming that the Ukraine war is over in 5 years' time, goodness me, I don't know that I can be doing this every day of the year for 5 years. But assuming it's going to be over by then, what you know, what are these all? And it's not just what we've been talking about in this thread. This is happening with uh no, it's not nano. Anyway, in Finland, they are ramping up production. They're ramping up production in Australia, in the UK, in Germany, Rheinmetall, and all these different entities ramping up production. There has to be some confidence that there's going to be orders coming through for the next 10 years plus. So yeah, that kind of interests me quite a bit. Ukraine's defense ministry has certified the first firefighting robot for demining operations. Originally designed for civilians, the robot has been enhanced for military use, providing remote control, real-time video, and improved safety. So there is so much innovation going on, particularly I think at the moment, well, obviously with aerial drones, UAVs, but also with UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles. There's a lot going on, and indeed that brings me on to what Flash News here says. In Ukraine, the Iron Range, quote, Iron Range, was launched for testing new weapons, according to the Ministry of strategies, and industry. Ukrainian manufacturers test samples of their current weapons free of charge at equipped sites. They also receive professional expertise, support, and advice from the military. Now, remember, I also reported yesterday that the academic world is now providing support for innovation in the uh, drone world with a masters in, I don't know, drone development or whatever it is that they're doing. So it's great that this is happening. This is going to benefit Ukraine, and I talked yesterday about how Ukraine also need to try and derive as much advantage from this war as they possibly can. And it sounds kind of odd, but if you are in a war and everything's bad and your economy is getting tanked, you're losing human beings, your culture's being um, degraded, with sites being destroyed, etc., etc., etc. Everything is challenging. Then you've got to try and eke out the advantages where you can. So looking at this, like, what can Ukraine provide to the world? What can they export back to the world? Yes, they are taking as much aid in as possible, but what can they? What can they? How can they derive benefit from this war? And R&D in and production of drones is going to be one of these things that they can definitely, um, I think, bank on quite literally going forward. I think the world is looking to Ukraine at the moment in terms of how to fight a modern war, and what equipment is needed. Anyway, and moving on to the last nugget here, this is Rob Lee saying, or actually quoting from The Economist, a quote, a quarter of his 200 strong unit are convicts released under a new scheme that trades sentences for service. 3 months ago, the men were in prison. Now they are on their first mission, fighting inside Russia. Major Kishak says they have turned out to be the best warriors he has seen. On August 13th, the unit lost its first man, a 24-year-old named Mikhailo, convicted of robbery. Gena Aka Wikipedia is a grey haired 47-year-old convicted in 2021 for murder and armed robbery. He says the booze got the better of him. That day, he was turned away trying to buy more beer. A guard tried to grab his weapon and the gun went off. Quote, I went home, went to bed, and a welcome committee was waiting for me when I woke up. His 3.5 years in prison, he says, gave him a calmness that helped him when he crossed into Russia. And so we are seeing the results of the increased efforts to mobilize within Ukraine, including from convicts. Thank you very much for listening to that. Though that's the end of my military aid video. I appreciate the support. Take care, you all, and a big shout out to Mark Biscu, and Olena. Mark and Olena are such wonderful supporters, as are all of the members of the channel. I really, really do appreciate you guys, and I don't thank you enough. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.